Hollywood is destroying DEI. Well, at least that's what the press would want you to believe. Paramount is rolling back degeneracy, equality, and incompetence initiatives to align with the recent poll mandate. Now, something to remember with these articles is that places like Variety are basically mouthpieces of Hollywood. If they're saying it, it's because Hollywood want you to know. So then it's weird that all of a sudden, companies are announcing that, trust us, we're not doing it anymore. On the same day, Disney announced it was removing diversity criteria from manager pay. We're not going to pay you based on how you look. You'd think that would warrant firing the CEO that implemented it, but apparently not. No. And the LA Times said that this is in decline in Hollywood despite audiences demanding incompetent movies. The issue is these companies have been hiring people into their organization for years. So even if they want to suddenly turn around and stop it, none of their employees do. The only reason they have a job in the first place is because they lowered the standards to include incompetent people. Let's face it, if racism is the only reason you've got a job, you won't want your company to stop doing it. But really, it was just because they were scared. Mandates came out and said, we're coming after you. What you're doing is illegal. Stop it. So when they say Hollywood ditches DEI to avoid Donald's wrath, this is simply what they want you to believe. Please don't investigate what we're doing or what we've done. Ignore that smoke over there. It's not fire, we promise. What was already going to be a tough, if nigh on impossible task that would require firing 99% of their company, that would be difficult even if you employed somebody who would be laughing as they fired them.
Come on!
Forcing them is going to make them look for loopholes, which is exactly what Warner Brothers seem to be doing, as they just decided to rename their efforts to inclusion after they were told to stop doing it, which, from their investor relations page, they have indeed done. All of the leadership team now are Inclusion Officer, Inclusion International, Inclusion Workforce Strategy, or my personal favorite, the person in charge of the inclusion pipeline. And let's be honest, none of these people have integrity. This change better aligns our language with our focus throughout the company, in the industry, and across our content. Yes, we want everyone to know that Warner Brothers stands for having no standards.
That's like being disabled at a football match, yeah? I mean, she's very close to the action, but hardly likely to score a goal.
We want to include everybody, even the mentally feeble. Do you have no talent? Come and work for Warner Brothers. You'll feel right at home. But it's weird that they made such public showcases of changing this thing. It doesn't make sense if the efforts were just a hiring manager on a product, or a few people in HR who decided to hire their own in-group. It seems that the signaling goes a little bit far. Unless, of course, this became part of their legal structure. If they built in systemic, illegal discrimination into the contracts that they were signing with the people involved.
I have 2 words to leave with you tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Inclusion rider.
That might open them up to where the changes become, please don't sue us. Look, we'll drop the discrimination stuff. We want to focus on how we're including people.
Inclusion rider.
Because it's never really made sense who exactly you're trying to appease. 2024 was a record year for women in the film industry. Representation was amazing. Although all of these women must have been massive in the isms because people of colour took a sharp decline. All I can say in this is we have to fire all of these bigots, like all of them. Did you work in 2024? We've got to get rid of you to make room for the people who apparently deserve to be there but can't get there on their own. This is an ideology that thrives. It always wants to appear as if it's been incredibly weak. It's always been oppressed and on the back burner. The staffers were always reflecting on how there was just broken promises, even though they were too thick to know that actually this began far before 2020. One of the greatest lies that's been told is this is a new thing. It came in post 2020. Before that, people were bigots. Instead of what it really was, an exponential, ever-increasing drive to destruction of the industry. Movies didn't just suddenly get bad. They've been bad for a while. It's just it hit a point where people started to notice. And I actually think they could have got away with it if these policies didn't build in incompetence, low IQ, basically the dregs of society being crowbarred into positions they don't deserve. Let's face it, if they could deserve to get there, they would have just gone for a job interview and been in there naturally. But these are people that managed to actively take over all of Hollywood and then burn it to the ground. Maybe that's how you get titles like John Ridley warns that DEI decline will harm Hollywood gains in diversity. Like, of course, that's the point. Did you know if you stop spraying water on something, it'll dry out? He's like a little Confucius over there, isn't he? But people have been crying that Hollywood is moving back on this stuff. June and October 2023. It's never happened, and despite the fact that it took a presidential order for them to even begin to start maybe trying to hide it a bit, Vanity Fair says, oh, they're just dying. How hard did the industry really try? They burnt the industry to the ground for this. How much harder did you want them to?
I'm hyperventilating a little bit. If I fall over, pick me up because I've got some things to say.
Has Hollywood given up on pushing No. Over 1 year old. Still no. Even in 2022, they were going, are you losing interest in it? No, they weren't. No. All of this is despite the fact that people of the global majority will simultaneously want to pretend that you have to give us something because there's not enough of us, but also we're the majority. Therefore, you need to put us into positions because that'll give you more money. Over-indexed on scripted series in 2019. Already over-indexing on television 6 years ago. And yet we still had all of the titles go, I can't believe you've betrayed us. And obviously, no, that wasn't enough. Burning your industry to the ground isn't enough for these people.
Outside of the confines of heteronormativity, misogyny, and racism.
It's thug life.
All of the people panicked that their golden goose was going to go away, and they might have to go back to putting the fries in the bag again. I'm just joking. They're too lazy to work there. No, this is only being done because it's a legal issue for them now. And so it sent me down a rabbit hole was this article from LinkedIn. They're at a crossroads, but is the script really changing? Picture this, early 2025. Executives are huddled in conference rooms, poring over contracts that once seemed revolutionary. Their diverse hiring practices sit in legal limbo. After an executive order, the impact feels seismic. Quietly reviewing their initiatives, legal teams scrutinizing the language in contracts. The very phrase inclusion rider, once a rallying cry for change, now carries a hint of liability. This wasn't just an internal, informal hiring practice. It wasn't HR working on their own or the odd director thinking, you know, actually I do think I want some useless, incompetent people on my team. You know what we could do within this heroic movie? Evil. No, instead, these were legally binding contracts that the company had themselves. There is paperwork to this. This is tracked and announced inside the company. I do not see in any way how actively discriminating against the people that you should be hiring was legal then or legal now. When legal teams are scrutinizing over the contracts they've been signing, doesn't seem like they're sure about it either. But one thing, it's like, what's an inclusion rider? As apparently, these are carefully crafted clauses that required diverse hiring practices. And these inclusion riders were mentioned on the Oscar stage by Frances McDormand. And so I went and found that speech, and it's wild.
Okay.
I don't want to exactly poison the well, but she seems like a lunatic.
Come on.
At one point, she even points to two blokes down the front and praises them for being raised by evil.
These two stalwart individuals were well raised by their feminist mothers.
And this is just from her acceptance speech. I mean, before she was even announced, we had to also layer it on really thick by the people that were leading into her getting the award in the first place.
What is so powerfully evident about the past recipients of this Academy Award is the strength of the women. The actresses' personal strength forged in the challenges they faced as women in their real-life journey to the Oscar stage.
Yes, for a supposedly oppressed group who has to be lifted into positions, they really can't shut up about how amazing and desperately needed they are at all times.
It's a new day in Hollywood with new challenges ahead for all of us. But none of us will ever forget those who came before us, those who blazed a trail for my generation and for those to come, like Jodie.
But as ever, after the insanity, the cackling, the speech did end with her famous announcement about this.
Because we all have stories to tell and projects we need finance. I have two words to leave with you tonight. Inclusion rider.
And it made me look, what on earth is it? The funny thing is, apparently they were inspired by a Commissioner Kalpani Kotagal, and you look it up, this is the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Bear that in mind. Equality doesn't mean everybody is treated the same. Equality means that everybody is the same, and therefore they're interchangeable. And so you can take away somebody that you don't like and replace them with someone you do like, and there will be absolutely no change in competence. Nobody wants equality, they want hierarchy. That's what merit is. The weird thing is, the more of a rabbit hole you go down on inclusion riders, they lead to some really strange places. Like Matt Damon.
Matt Damon. Matt Damon. Matt Damon. Matt Damon.
This guy has loved to virtue signal me for a very long time about his privileged which just seems like flexing, doesn't it? I'm so privileged and amazing. Because trying to find out what inclusion riders were led me to Cohen-Milstein, where it said an inclusion rider is a provision in an actor or content creator's contract designed to promote diversity in film, casting, and production. It sets forth a hiring process that incorporates elements including commitment to deepening and diversifying hiring pools.
Particularly Snow White. In general, you don't normally see Snow Whites that are of Latin descent.
Establishment of benchmarks, targets for hiring, and implementation measures of accountability, which is weird because the people getting hired by these practices are allergic to accountability. It says inclusion riders were based on a template that was originally developed by Cohen-Milstein alumni Kalpana Kotagal. It is one big club and you're not in it. This is just a spiral to hell that keeps getting worse. As well as people from Pearl Street Films. As the brief history of the inclusion rider will tell you, the idea for the inclusion rider originated at Pearl Street Films in 2016. Who are they? They've got an Instagram, creators who believe in the power of storytelling to connect people and affect change. We're building a community that is inclusive to all. Except people like me. I have a feeling that none of their hiring practices involve me. You're a get out. Because as you scroll down their page, I mean, you'll start to notice trends. There's a lot of trends you'll start noticing all the way down. There isn't a link to inclusionrider.org, which if you click it, goes through to a Color of Change website, which asks you for money. Strange how it all comes back to that, isn't it? Yeah, you just want to get more of us in the industry. Yeah, more of me. Just put me in it. That's because I want to get paid more, really. It'll make you feel better about yourself. It would be weird if something like this was built into the legal contracts, wouldn't it? If just give us money was built into the legally binding contracts. That might make it a bit obvious about the intent. Either way, back to Pearl Street Films, the ones where this originated in 2016. And you'll find that Pearl Street Films was created by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
Also, Jennifer Todd became the president in October 2012. Slightly weird that Jennifer Todd's involved, as her credits include 3 Austin Powers films, including The Spy Who Shagged Me. Seemed very progressive. Who are we including in that one? The same people as the Oscars? Honora's one. This one goes out to the whore. But as Pearl Street Films created the inclusion rider, it might be that Ben Affleck and Matt Damon have done more to knock off billions of dollars from the Hollywood industry than anybody else. These were contracts that now sit in legal limbo because they are being investigated on whether they might be discriminatory. I don't know how else you'd interpret them, but you know, the law. And now lots of other companies have built this into their studios. And if you actually go into these contracts, they are utterly insane. We are talking 24 gold plate pure evil. You can come up with any slur for anything that's been happening over the recent years. You won't find a more dense version of it than in these contracts. And dense is definitely the right word. Now, these inclusion riders were based on a template originally comes from Kalpana Kotagal. You know him, the guy who's apparently for equal employment opportunities. But these contracts are largely identical. There's just the odd difference in places like this. Accordingly, name of the company agrees to make this inclusion rider part of the policy for hiring instead of part of the contract between them on the picture. Interestingly, what the individual ones could mean, you could use this to say, if you want me in your movie, you have to obey this rider for everybody else. So if you were an insane, evil, but incredibly popular actress,
Inclusion rider.
you could also use this to demand that other lunatics like you also get on the project by law. Now, this is a long document. I mean, you can pause it in places and just read for yourself. But it is basically lists of everything that they want to discriminate for. Addressing underrepresentation includes, interestingly, the underrepresentation. They were already over-indexed in 2019, but don't let that stop you. Go off. Where you have loads of nationalities, and then it says other non-black people of like, what? Is that just everybody in the world? This is a very long-winded way of going, everybody except Europeans. And then it just goes, women of all backgrounds, even if they are Europeans. So it's actually European men, people with disabilities, because obviously being any of these things it's just the same as being disabled, according to this contract. People over 40, which must count as a disability now. People from certain religious minorities, certain ones, not all religions, ramifications. Only our preferred ones that we want to shove into places, and the alphabet.
I'd quite like to try and pull off an elf.
Addressing systemic underrepresentation by systemically discriminating against people in your legal contract also requires an intersectional lens, fostering particular attention to those who experience intersectional discrimination. European men, according to that paragraph. But this discrimination could have multiple intersecting underrepresented identities, including the re-isms, the set-isms, the cut-isms, the size-isms, all the isms. And we need to recognize the opportunity to improve hiring practices on their productions and thereby seek to deepen the discrimination within their company and hold themselves accountable to make meaningful contributions to discriminate against people in their hiring practices. So how do they do it? Well, starts in the script. Oh yeah, this isn't just the employees. This legally binding contract even destroys the story. So as early as possible, basically everybody higher up in the company shall look for opportunities where they could discriminate against people as fast as possible. This includes considering casting of women in roles that were scripted for men. It's Warner Brothers that are making that Harry Potter series, right? Probably lots of opportunities there. You're a woman, Harry. I'm a what?
You mock that which is sacred.
I mock that which is absurd.
As well as make a deliberate effort to consider those who have been affected by discrimination. So, European men then. In doing so, the company shall seek guidance from expert counsel to set benchmarks and targets for their discrimination. This is where I think the next stage will go, that you'll hire someone competent to make a movie, but then these experts and counsel will be the ones that drag it down to the point where you end up with something that's competently made and could have been good, but they just kind of make it everything mid and grey and but hopefully you'll accept it. Interestingly, they do start defining their terms, such as underrepresented is intended to be an expansive term, which is the opposite of a definition. A definition is intended to include everything that isn't required, but nothing else. It defines the limits of the word, and they're like, we want it to include everybody, except those European men. This definition can be adjusted to address specific situations. And I do like how they're going benchmarks and inclusive hiring targets are not quotas or set-asides. Probably because that would be definitely illegal. The thing is, I don't know what a benchmark is, except a quota. Look, you need to hire this many people, but it's not a quota. What is a target that you need to be accountable for if you miss it, if not a quota? I know the lawyers have been going at this and trying to come up with the loopholes, but not sure you've been particularly effective.
What are you doing? What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
Additionally, in relying on an expert who can collect and analyze data, we should also rely on human resources, who are full of our ideological people, and DE&I professionals. So once again, we've now created jobs in an industry to police the thing that we put into the industry. We basically infected the industry with this ever-growing parasitical being, and then we forced you to hire us to police it. Everything comes down to creating jobs for myself. They even came up with an Inclusion Rider studio and production company policy implementation guide. Anything that has a name that long, someone's scamming you. And of course, we encourage involvement of counsel to ensure compliance with relevant equal employment and non-discrimination laws. Look, we told you to check it. Don't just trust us. Read this thing. There's no way you think this can get past it, surely. Like, trust us, you definitely need a lawyer for this. Get a lawyer so you can sue them, not us, if this goes wrong, alright? Recruitment plan. The casting director shall develop a plan to invite individuals from underrepresented backgrounds. We need to specifically go down and hunt them. Travel into the rainforests in desperate search of somebody to hire. Auditions. The audition pool of candidates will consist of at least 40 to 50% of underrepresented groups. That doesn't even make sense from an English terminology basis. If 50% of people are underrepresented, they can't be underrepresented. It's physically impossible for the maths to make sense. The audition process should include a good faith consideration of casting women in roles scripted for men. The name's Bond, Jamie Bond, as well as an awareness of intersectional discrimination, or as well as consider individuals from groups who have been most marginalized or disadvantaged. From everything I've read, that's me. So when you recruit, you've got to outreach to unions and guilds. Try and crowbar people in as writers, producers, crew, including, this term doesn't even make sense, but apparently it's a legal one. Note, there is substantial evidence that careful consideration can have tremendous impacts on overall diversity. Furthermore, if you fill the most senior roles of a particular project, this deeply influences diversity downstream. Interesting. You see, if I was in charge as an executive and I hired people that looked like me, that would be evil, wrong, and discrimination. Apparently. But according to this That's a good thing if other people do it. You need to put people into an executive role because they have an in-groove preference, and that's good. But if that's all. No, it's beyond the pale. Pun not intended, but was laughed at. For these reasons, we encourage adoption of the inclusion rider as early as possible so that they can be as biased as possible for as long as possible from the top down to change as much as the company as possible. That's why they're always desperate for power. They know it has knock-on effects. So when you interview for basically every single role possible in Hollywood is listed here, again, 40 to 50% of off-screen positions in the interview process must be apparently underrepresented, even though if you do that, they're not underrepresented. So definitionally, they can't exist, which presumably means all of those people vanish out of reality as you have undefined them and therefore erased them. I think that's how that works. Somehow you have to have toilets available for people that don't have parts to use toilets. I'm confused. And you must have a land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that I am not flying. I am indeed standing on some land with my legs. No, a meaningful acknowledgement of the indigenous people's past and relationship to the land where the activity occurs. Oh, sorry. I am English, and therefore I have been here for well over 1,000 years. Get stuffed, you bigot. The objectives. This could include human resources and professionals. Only down on page 6 do we even get to story authenticity, where we must affirmatively seek opportunities to, underrepresented, blah, blah, blah. So not story authenticity then. We need to track data on the number of people who auditioned who are over 40 and disabled, right? If you're an over 40-year-old woman with disabilities, you are in. That's even without everything else.
Come on! Inclusion rider.
But I do like this last paragraph, where the company may consider meaningful commitments. The company may agree to contribute 1% of the overall budget of a particular project, capped at $100,000, to one of the grassroots organizations described in the Includer Rider resource that will support cast, crew, and executives from underrepresented groups. Remember when I clicked the Pearl Street Films thing and it just took me to a donation page? In the legally binding contract that people sign when they're hired into a company, it suggests you might just want to give them some money. Only $100,000 maybe, but this is Hollywood, you've got that. These movies are losing millions of dollars, hiring incompetent people from the top down and but you should give them more money. Why? Well, I mean, they don't look European. No wonder they wanted a lawyer to see whether you were opening up your company to liabilities.
I loved it.
The company may commit to a meaningful internal budgetary commitment for this degeneracy, equality, and incompetence work, including analysis of their slate pipeline. Lots of investigations of pipelines going on here. Internal demographics, an investment for below-the-line crew. However, internal investment should be focused on hiring rather than apprenticeship or programs of temporary work. As research has indicated, the priority should be on paid, permanent work. Everything in this is based around how can we crowbar people who shouldn't be in the company into the company forever. The contracts were getting companies to legally commit to infesting themselves with ideologues and activists. No wonder when some guy comes along, but that's illegal, bro. You shouldn't be doing that. They panic. They don't know how to get rid of this. How do you even begin to unwind something from your company when you've been hiring people under this for years? And remember, all of this was inspired by CalPANA, the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Remember, when people say, we just want equal opportunities, this is what that means. So that puts a different spin on, we're rolling it back, bro. We're announcing to the press, we're rolling it back. Trust us, bro. We're rolling it back, bro. No, we've dropped it. We promise. We're afraid of you. It seems like they are crapping themselves. Maybe all of these years of contracts now have liabilities for major corporations. That's why they're hitting a pause. They don't know whether they can get away with it anymore. And if this had been done by just the bias of HR or a few people hiring separately for projects, that would be a lot harder to track down and prove than legally binding contracts people have been signing, such as the inclusion riders. The Oscars, Grammys, and other major award shows have increasingly relied on inclusion riders to set benchmarks for productions. The push for profitability is forcing streamers to focus on broader, often whiter audiences. Turns out targeting niche audiences leads to niche audiences. Who would have thought? And you know what? If it had worked, maybe you would have had a point. But for you to burn your industry to the ground, and you're still like, we're kind of being forced, but we might try and roll it back a bit. We'll probably just rename it, but if businesses have a duty to their shareholders to pursue things that make money, at this point you have to conclude it isn't just the majority of the workers that need to get fired at the company, but any CEO, any executive who has presided over this mess and let this happen, let alone pushed it. At this point, even ignorance of the problem means you're not doing your job. I would find it extremely difficult as a shareholder of any of these companies to come up with a reason of why any of them should still be in their positions. It might be in this case with the people employed in Hollywood, that they just need to replace their CEOs, start from scratch, as I don't see how they come back from this. But those were just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe, more videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.